Welcome to the Fighting on Film podcast, the podcast all about classic and obscure war movies, from the Normandy landings to the days of chivalry and swords. If it's been captured on film, we're going to try and cover it. I'm Robbie of RM Military History.
I'm Matthew Moss of Historical Firearms and the Armourer's Bench.
Check your ammo, count your feet, and get back in the chopper because Merc Month 2 is back, baby! Woohoo!
Merc Month 2.
Merc Month 2. Harder, better, stronger. I'm better. I am better. You see that meme from the boys? No, it's great. We love Mercenary Month. And if you're new to the show or if you haven't listened to Merc Month 1, we did it back in early 2021. And it was a whole lot of fun. Movies that you wouldn't necessarily think that we would cover, we were just able to go and do. And we hit the trail and we work our way into Mexico for this inaugural Merc Month 2 film with 1966's The Professionals. And it's the first Western we've ever done.
It is, isn't it? Wow. And what a classic it is. This, I will say it now, this is one of my absolute favourite films, just in general.
Yeah, it might, next to, I think, is it A Fistful of Dollars with Clint? I think it's my favourite Western. It's got some high praise already. So without further ado, Matt, talking of actors, maybe you should jump into the cast because it's a smorgasbord of talent this week.
Yeah, it's a tight cast, but it's all gas, no breaks, because we've got Burt Lancaster, Lee Marvin, Robert Ryan, Jack Palance, and Woody Strode, who are the professionals.
They are.
With Jack Palance playing the antagonist. So top billing goes to Burt Lancaster on this one, and we're no stranger to Burt's films on the pod. We've done Go Tell the Spartans not too long ago. And Burt was in war movies from the 50s right through to the 80s. He was in 10 Tall Men in 1951, From Here to Eternity, Run Silent, Run Deep in 1958, 7 Days in May in 1964. The Train in 1965, which I watched not too long ago.
We've got to do that. People keep raving about it.
It's a really interesting film, and it's going to be great for Train Month.
We've been teasing it, haven't we? Train Month.
keep teasing Train Month. Castle Keep in 69.
Casablanca Express on that one, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I know, we've done two belters. We've done Dirty Dozen 3.
Yeah.
Which is on a 2, which has a train in it.
Yeah.
And this has a couple of great train scenes.
And Dark of the Sun, that's the big train
and
one.
Dark of the Sun.
Month 1. Yeah.
Go Tell the Spartans in 78, which I mentioned a moment ago. Zulu Dawn in 79, and then The Skin in 1981. And in the film, Lancaster plays Bill Dolworth, who is a former revolutionary. He's an American that went to Mexico to fight in the revolution with Pancho Villa. And he's since left. Bit of a scoundrel, bit of a ladies' man. He's very charismatic in this film. He's brought back into the fold to do this mission, which I suppose, before I go into the rest of the cast, just to explain what the film's about if you haven't seen it already. It's a group of 4 mercenaries go into Mexico to rescue the wife of a railroad magnate billionaire, Joe Grant, who's played by Ralph Bellamy. It turns out that, spoilers, his wife hasn't been kidnapped. She's run away to be with the man that she loves, Jack Palance. And speaking of Palance plays Jesus Raza, and his war movie credits include Halls of Montezuma in 1951, Attack in 1956, which we covered not too long ago at all.
I adore that film. I bought the 1956 dated poster of that the other month.
Did you? Amazing.
Absolutely, that was massive. I'm going to know where to put it. It's huge.
Who needs windows?
I know, right?
Austerlitz in 1960, Shea 1969, Legion of the Damned in the same year, and then Bullet for Rommel also in the same year, all in 1969.
I've got a poster for that as well.
Have you?
I've got a 19...
God, you're a bit of a Palance super fan, aren't you?
I've got an original Italian poster for that movie because it's an Italian film.
Tasty.
It was in a vintage store, and it was just on the wall, and I thought I've got to have that. It's like 12 quid or something.
Nice. And then Lee Marvin, who is on form in this film. I mean, when isn't he on form? I've never actually seen a film where I've gone, this is not great.
It's perfect casting, isn't it? Really for him.
It is. This is the film that Lee Marvin was born to be in.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah.
Well, I think we talked about this the other day, but almost he's better in this than he is in Dirty Dozen.
Yeah, I think so. Because he has more to do. It's
true.
Yeah.
It's less of an ensemble piece.
It is less of an ensemble.
Gives him a bit more of a focus. So Marvin plays Henry Rico Farden, who is, I think, ex-US military. He's been a revolutionary with Pancho Villa as well. He's a weapons expert. At the beginning of the film, he's got the most alley intro. He's there, sat behind the Browning 1917, just letting a belt off, demonstrating it to some US Army soldiers.
It's great, isn't it? Yeah. Being an arms dealer.
Yeah, basically. God knows why, because the US Army had already bought them at that point. But so we don't really need to run over Lee Marvin's extensive war movie credits, but we will, because that's what we did on Fighting Off Film.
Regale us again.
8 Iron Men, 1952. Seminole in 1953. The Glory Brigade with Victor Mature in 1953. Caine Mutiny with Bogey and The Raid, both in 1954. Attack with Palance in 1956. The Dirty Dozen in 1967. Hell in the Pacific a year later. Shout at the Devil in 1976. The Big Red One in 1980. And then his final film was Delta Force in 1986. And
yeah, what career!
My petition for this year in December is Delta Force December. I don't know what you think about that.
We can do it. There's enough of them.
I'm going to put it out there.
Yeah. I mean, we tried to tank the listenership before. We try again.
I don't know. I think everyone really just loved Dirty Dozen.
Let us know.
I mean, it's either Delta Force December, Rob, or it's Dirty Dozen series December. So
yeah, or 2 weeks to Dad's Army December, because there's 2 Dad's Army films.
True.
Yeah. What about Dad's Army Delta December? We just do it all.
Just like a bang bang of the two. Wow.
Yeah. Oh my God! Imagine Delta Force with John Mesurating.
Oh my God, that would be amazing.
Do you think that's wise, sir?
Ripping with an Uzi.
Exactly. Yeah. Amazing.
Then we've got Robert Ryan, who plays Hans Ehrengard. And Ryan is a little bit underused in this film, as is Strode, but we'll talk about that more later on. And in this, he plays a ex-US cavalryman, and his role really is he's the horse expert. He's looking after the horses, which is essential.
Oh, definitely. In the desert, they don't make it out to be in the movie, but it's really important.
Yeah, it's like the most if the horses die, that everyone's dead.
Yeah, he doesn't even bring the horses back at the end because he gets wounded. Lancaster does it. It's such a piss take.
Stop trying to prevent Ryan from getting his 10 grand at the end.
I know, right? Yeah.
So Ryan's first war movie was Bombardier in 1943. Behind the Rising Sun in the same year. Marine Raiders in 1944. The Flying Leathernecks in 51, Men in War in 1957, which we've covered on the pod before. He was Gavin in The Longest Day. He was, of course, General Grey in Battle of the Bulge, which we've also covered on the pod way back. And if you haven't heard our tirade on Battle of the Bulge, then why not? Dirty Dozen in 67 with Lee. He was in Custer of the West with Shaw in 67. Anzio in 68 and The Wild Bunch in 1969. And I think The Wild Bunch, and this movie kind of sit together well in that they have a similar tonality, but also they're working with like a similar setting and a similar post-revolution, what's it all for? Mercenary, men for hire type kind of vibe. And then rounding out the 4 professionals is Woody Strode, who plays Jake Sharp, who is a bounty hunter and an expert tracker. Yep. Strode's first war movie was The Royal African Rifles in 1953, which isn't actually about the Royal African Rifles at all. He was also in Porkchop Hill in 1959, which we covered on the podcast, and we loved him in that. And then perhaps his most famous role within the war movie genre is Sergeant Rutledge, which is a Western, again, in 1960. And he was in Shay in 1969.
Jack Palance.
With Jack Palance.
There you go.
And speaking of Palance, we mentioned him a moment ago, but he's joined by his trusty lieutenant, Chiquita, who Burt Lancaster, in one of his many fabulous lines, describes as she can lick a regiment but can't dance a lick.
It's great. Yeah.
I mean, that's a hell of a way of describing a woman. But she mostly appeared in Westerns, but she did have one appearance in an episode of Combat in 1963.
Yes, get the combat links in there.
So always got to mention the combat links. And then finally, there is Dyslexia's kicking in. Hang on, when I find my notes.
Yeah, it will omit all this.
And then finally, we have Claudia Cardinale, who plays Miss Marie Grant, who is the kidnapped but not kidnapped wife of the rail magnate, Joe Grant. And she appeared in Lost Command in 1966, The Hell with Heroes 2 years later, and then in Escape to Athena in 1979 with Telly Savalas and Roger Moore. And then she was in The Skin in 1981, again with Lancaster. La Storia in 86, and she was also in a Italian television series, The Silent Mountain, in 2014. And that pretty much rounds out cast for this week.
Yeah,
it's small but really tight and well-rounded, and as we'll talk about in a moment, I'm sure, slightly underused in places.
Definitely. Like it's just one of those movies where proper big. It's like Ocean's 11 casting now, you know, or like
or the
something
Expendables.
like that. Yeah, the Expendables. There you go. It's like that, isn't it? You know, but these guys are all in there.
Month 6, Expendables month.
Right. Yeah. Unlike the Expendables, all these guys were pretty much in their prime.
Oh yeah, this is. I would say this is the peak of all of them. I mean, it's a little bit later on for Lancaster, but he's just still up there. And of course, he's top billing, so he's still the draw at the box office with Marvin, and Strode's coming through.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, to be honest, Marvin and Lancaster have about the same level of
they do. Well, they famously really didn't get on set because they had a bit of an ego clash, and Marvin's drinking Burt didn't like that. So apparently one day Marvin got on his knees and said sorry to Lancaster in this big elaborate way, and Lancaster thought he was being sincere, but Marvin was actually taking the mickey out of him. This is something I read when I was doing my notes. Anyway, moving on to production. What a good way to segue. So, directed by Richard Brooks, he's an 8-time Oscar nominee. He directed Cat on a Hop Tin Roof, Looking for Mr. Goodbar. He did a couple of war movies in the 50s, Battle Circus and Take the High Ground. He also wrote the movie 2. It was adapted from a 1964 novel, Mule for Marquesa by Frank O'Rourke. It was filmed in Death Valley, Valley of Fire State Park, and Coachella Valley in California. 3-time Oscar and BAFTA-winning cinematographer Conrad Hall did the cinematography. This was only his 6th credit as well. His later works, he goes on to work for an amazing credits list. So Cool Hand Luke, Hell in the Pacific, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. And his final 2 movies were American Beauty and Road to Perdition.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And Road to Perdition is a beautiful short film.
I know, right? And he was nominated for an Oscar for this, for the film.
It got quite a few nominations, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. I think it picked up
about 3 Oscar noms as well.
Yeah, for writing and director. Writing, director, and best writing and best cinematography. So they must have truncated them back then.
Yeah.
Yeah, bizarre. Because that would have been 4. A bit weird, isn't it? I don't know. Anyway, so one thing I found when you're talking about Strode being underused and like interested in that. So I found Willie Strode's autobiography, a PDF of it online.
Yes.
And he
very
said,
good read.
Yeah, really interesting. And we also found an amazing PDF of the press kit for this movie, which was really interesting.
That was really cool.
Yeah. So he mentions that he was billed before Lancaster. So I'll read you the entire thing from his autobiography. I think it's really interesting. And the biography is from 1990. Sorry, memoir is from 1919. It's called Gold Dust. And he says, after we finished the picture and I got back to Los Angeles, Lee Marvin called and asked me to come out to his house in Malibu. I showed up and Lee said, "You've got to see this letter from Columbia Studios. Dear Lee, we want your permission to do this for the sake of the picture. It will have nothing to do with the advertising or billboards. We would like to start the film in this way. Columbia Pictures, The Professionals, starring Lee Marvin sequence, starring Robert Ryan and sequence, starring Woody Strode and sequence." Lee stopped right there. He said, "Did you ever think your name would be on top of Burt Lancaster's? I'm signing." And without warning, he leaned over and gave me a kiss on the lips. That's how I got my yeah. That's how I got my first star billing.
Amazing.
Amazing. The studio had to write letters to all the stars and get their permission on order of the credits. They put my name ahead of Lancaster's because that worked best visually. They didn't use my name in any of the newspaper ads, and my name didn't appear on the marquees at any theaters in Hollywood either. I didn't care if I was last, as long as my name was up there somewhere and I could steal a picture just by having a good moment.
Very true. Yeah. And I think that's interesting. So I assume from the way he's written that there, it means like that's in the trailer. So it's the name sequence of showing him.
Yeah.
Name and then sequence of showing him.
That's it.
That kind of thing. Yeah.
Because then in the when we looked at that PDF of the adverts and things, and when you look at them now, Strode's name's not even on there.
No.
So it's really bizarre. There's like 30 of these different newspaper
he
ads
talks about
things.
In the book as well, he talks about how he didn't even have like star billing for Sergeant Rutledge, and he is the titular character in that film.
Yeah.
And he talks about how he just had a featuring credit at the bottom of the poster in a little black box that said featuring Woody Strode.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
And I forget who the director of that is now, but he was like, the director always says, "Well, you're a star to me," you know. And I think he said
John Ford said he should have had an Oscar.
That's it, John Ford. Yeah, he should have. And he got paid $1,000 per week. Sorry, and he said that wasn't a lot. And then he got $350,000 for going and doing like a spaghetti western, and he was like, "That's where I actually started making money." Such an interesting read. Anyway, so getting back to the film. The film's score is composed by Maurice Jarre. Is it Maurice Jarre? Jarre? Never know how to say that one.
Yeah, Jarre. I don't know.
Yeah. So he's famous for doing Lawrence of Arabia, Passage to India, The Longest Day. He does the Train, a Lancaster film. He's Paris Burning, Night of the Generals. Really like famous composer. It's a great soundtrack. Really hits those Western beats perfectly.
It's got those little Spanish motifs, like the Mexican motifs.
It's good. Like the maracas and all that going on.
Yeah. And the horns. It's perfect.
Very good. And Brooks mentions that he wanted to make a more modestly budgeted film after doing Lord Jim in 1965 for 10 million. And that was a bit of a flop.
O'Toole.
Yeah. And he mentions the film was made for 6 million. I couldn't corroborate. I read the fact online, couldn't find a source, but I'm going to assume it was around that. It was made by Pax Entertainment and distributed by Columbia Pictures. And its all-time gross to date is over 19 million. So it was a success. And as we mentioned, it got its Oscar nominations, and the film was released in early November 1966 in the USA, but we had to wait almost another 6-7 months here because it was released in May 1967 here. And interestingly, when Columbia first bought the rights to the book, they wanted Gregory Peck, Frank Sinatra, and Robert Mitchum.
Okay, I mean that could work. Yeah,
it could work, but they're a bit too old by that point.
Yeah. When did they buy the rights?
Well, the book came out in 64.
Okay, so the turnaround was pretty quick to get it into cinemas then.
Oh no, they wouldn't have been that old.
They would have. They were, I think, just a little bit older. I think
Peck's too straight. I know he does westerns, but he's a bit.
I can't see Peck running a Winchester shotgun as well as Lou does in this film.
Not as good as Marvin. I can see Mitchum perhaps as Lancaster's character.
Yeah.
He's got that rough and tumble. Sinatra.
As who?
As Robert Ryan's character. It's like, how do you do that?
I could see Sinatra doing Lancaster's character.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, you wouldn't. You do Sinatra as Lancaster's character, you do Peck as Marvin, and then Mitchum as Ryan, surely.
Yeah.
Or Mitchum as Strode, maybe. I don't know. But anyway, they didn't go with that.
I could see Kirk Douglas in this as well. You could. Oh yeah. You could have Kirk Douglas in like maybe the either the Dulworth or the Enghard role.
Yeah, you could.
Maybe.
Yeah. Interesting. But a sequel was planned after the film did well, but all the cast schedules just never got on right. Yeah, so they never. And by the time all the schedules were clear, it was the early 70s, and Robert Ryan had cancer, and it was too ill to do any of it, and it was scrapped. And then a modern remake was announced in 2000 with GoldenEye screenwriter Bruce Farstein to write and to direct John Woo.
Fuck off.
Yeah. Apparently. It had Nick Cage in it.
Oh, fantastic. Marvellous. Jesus. Yeah. Oh my, yeah, Nick Cage would have definitely been
in it. Yeah.
Been in it, wouldn't he? Gee, oh God.
It hasn't happened.
I can see it. Nick
obviously.
Cage, John Travolta, Christian Slater.
Yeah. Just you're doing most of the cast out of Wintle because off the top of your head.
and that awful Broken Arrow film.
Oh yeah.
And Face Off.
Yeah.
Just those terrible 90s.
You could have John Malkovich in there, maybe.
Yeah, John Malkovich is Strode's character.
2000. You could have had Denzel as Woody Strode's character if you were going to go down that route.
But I would have put Denzel in as Ryan's character just to switch it up a little bit.
Yeah, you'd have done that. Yeah. When I'm done with you, Jesus, you'll be playing ball in Pelican Bay.
Oh my God! I can't believe John Woo almost ended up doing a remake of this. That is terrible. Thank God that never happened.
Oh Christ!
I mean, Woo's good at what he does, but that would have just it would have been set in the present day as well, wouldn't it? Yeah. And it would have just been awful.
Set in like I don't know, like New Mexico or something, perhaps.
Oh God, it would have been as bad as the plane job.
As the what?
Maltberg.
Say again, because you went a bit robotic there.
Okay. So did you?
Yeah.
It would have been as bad as the Italian Job remake, whatever the hell that was, with Mark Wahlberg. And Edward Norton. That was dire.
Yeesh. But thank gosh they haven't done it yet. So anyway, moving on to the retro
sad we didn't get the sequel though.
I know the sequel would have been great.
Before we move on, I'm just going to throw it out there. I'm sad.
Yeah. Well, apparently the reason they didn't do it was because of the Magnificent Seven sequel only having Yul Brynner. They wanted to make sure they brought the principal cast back.
Yes. So the Magnificent Seven sequels are perhaps worse than the Dirty Dozen. Let me say that again. The Magnificent Seven sequels are perhaps worse than the Dirty Dozen ones because it goes. The second one has Yul Brynner, and then the third one has a completely different cast. And then the fourth one has a completely different cast. But there's a dude that looks nothing like Yul Brynner playing the Chris character in both of the third and fourth one. And you're just like, what? No.
Amazing.
It doesn't make sense.
Well, thank God they didn't do it. It might have been awful. Yeah.
They could have done it without Ryan, but it's a shame.
Could have, but it would have been a shame. So the retro review is back. Dick Richard is back. Double Dick, he's back.
Double Dick's back.
I love seeing that name when I do the. It's just become a little thing, a little gag. So Daily Mirror from the 5th of May, 1967. I'll read you his review. The Professionals lives up to its name. A slick professional job done by people who know how to take a simple raw idea and make it into a slab of suspense. Director Richard Brooks' script is crisp, tough, and often funny. But though the film moves quite slowly and doggedly towards the climax, action dominates the screen. Ambush and what a lively eyeful it all is, with buildings being dynamited, ambushes, sudden death, hard riding on an escaped ramshackle train, Burt Lancaster's muscles, built and grin, plus the classy chassis of Claudia Cardinal. It's set in the hot and arid, craggy wastelands of Mexico. 4 men have been hired by a rich American to rescue his wife. The Professionals is highly worth watching.
Dick does it again.
Yeah. You're never downhearted when you get a bit of Double Dick.
No. You know it's always going to be a strong review when Dick does it. But
get your mind out of the gutter, Matthew. No, it's a great review. And all the reviews pretty much were like that. But then all of the reviews I read did say that it does sag towards the end.
I have opinions on that too, which we've touched on off, which I think we'll come back to in a moment.
Yes, we will.
But before we talk about those, we need to do the one-word reviews.
We do, yeah, and we got another nice crop. Everyone's excited for Merc Month. We love to see it. So we had David Rees-Jones goes with deadly. Valerie Frank says great. Paul O'Brien goes with classy. Brian Suits says inconsistent. Then we have David Bobber goes with cleavage. You can't deny it. There is quite a bit going on towards the end. Ian Fraser says Fandango. We have Ancient Loggy Fella says epic. Jay Neal says self-made man. And Terry Eris goes with superb.
Superb. I would agree. Self-made man makes me laugh. That's one of my favorite lines out of the film.
Great line. It's for me, it's not the response of Marvin, but it's his little smirk. It's fab. It's so good. So maybe we should move on to the alley tally.
I think so.
It's time for Alley Tally on Fighting on Film.
It's a good movie. It's a good movie, Rob.
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
It's
it really is.
A good movie. And there's some really cool stuff in this film. And Marvin makes all of it look even cooler.
He
just
does.
By the way he moves. That man knows how to make handling a gun look good on screen.
Yeah. He just, I don't know, it's just he looks so effortless with it.
There's the old maxim of like smooth is fast and Lee Marvin's smooth.
Oh yeah.
Like we'll come on to it for favorite scenes because a lot of my favorite scenes in this film do link into Lee Marvin running the shit out of a shotgun.
Me as well.
But there's some really cool stuff in this. I mean, I just mentioned the shotgun, but we were introduced to him, ripping through a belt on a Browning 1917 water-cooled machine gun.
Yeah, it's really cool.
And I really do love the way the film introduces everyone at the beginning.
Oh, it's fab.
It shows them all as professional. Like Lee Marvin's demonstrating a machine gun, looking very competent. Burt Lancaster is committing adultery.
He's
and
with
then
a lady.
parkouring out of a window.
Partridge.
Strode is bringing in a man for bounty. And Robert Ryan's just decking people for being dicks to horses.
I love it. It's so against type for Ryan. It's never what I think, because he's quite old in this. And I think him lamping people just makes me laugh every time I see it.
He's taking no shit when the horse cruelty is occurring. And he is the moral heart of the film.
Oh, pretty much. Yeah.
To be fair, isn't he? And that sets it up right there in 5 seconds.
Yeah. Because there's a reason why he gets captured and the other ones don't. Because I wholeheartedly, in my head, I'm thinking Lancaster would fight his way out of that train carriage, and so would Strode, so would Marvin. But Ryan might not. So
Ryan's more of a thinking man, I think, with this. And you're right. I think he would probably just be like, I can get out of this another way without.
It's like, will horses be hurting me getting out?
Yes.
If they will, I ain't doing it.
Someone put a gun to a horse's head and he was like, nope, it's fine. Hands up.
Fucking give up.
Yeah.
10 grand ain't worth it.
No, leave that horse alone. So, Rob, what's your alley pick this week? And then we'll talk about
I've got a couple.
The plethora.
So Lee Marvin's drip is just insane in this movie. Like, if you don't know what drip means for an older listener, it's a slang term for like your clothes and how it looks on you. Like, is she drip? Just how it
looks
is.
Good. Yeah.
Looks good. So when Marvin gets off that train to go and see Grant, he's in this like chunky knit. He's got a cavalry hat on, some slacks. He's just dripping. It's like the coolest geography teacher you've ever seen. Like, man's just dripping. I don't care. 11 M19, 11 mag pouch. It's just beautiful. And I like his choice of weaponry because he's got a Colt Police Special, which is wrong for the period, but it looks fine. An M1911 combo, and I like it because I think it shows his army life, and then it shows his current cutting edge tech, trading our firearms thing. So I really love, and then him just getting that Winnie 1897. It's just beautiful.
The riot length Winchester 1897. Which there's like a few of them. They're all carrying, like, I think Lancaster and Marvin are carrying them, and then Strode, I think, has a
Winchester.
The Winchester, yeah. So they have Winchester 92s. him and Ryan, and that there's. Well, we'll talk about one of my favorite scenes briefly, but there's that bit in the canyon, which is the first gunfight of the movie, where they know that they're about to meet some of Raz's men. Lee explains to the rest of them, like, if he takes his hat off and puts it over his gun hand, then it's on. And the way he explains it is cold. It's it's great. And then they just let rip. Him and
That's the whole thing.
Lancaster just let rip. That is very true.
Exactly.
And I think the weapons handling throughout the film underlines that professional backbone.
It really does.
Because Lee's there with like a shaving brush, cleaning out the action of the Winchester.
Well, he famously made sure the weapons were in check on set. There's like a legendary tale of him cleaning the weapons in the desert and things. He was all about that. And if you listen to our show with legendary stuntman Jim Dowdle, like it's just tales of that. Like Marvin is a gun guy, so it really, and there's little things like just breaking the Winchester levers up so they're safe when they're leaning up against a rock. It's just little details. It's great.
Yeah, people reload in this film, Rob.
They do all the time.
People reload.
Yeah.
Jack Palance literally, he takes his revolver and he clears all the cylinders and then reloads before he executes a line of federales.
Yeah,
and it's the coldest reload. It's the coldest
cold
revolver reload we've seen so far, because he's just talking to a guy, reloads the revolver and starts shooting people in the back.
Don't need to make another gif of Palance's reload. But it's all the other things as well, like Springfield 1903 bolt actions. It's all the weapons that aren't necessarily Western weapons that come in that make this film interesting.
It's that turn of the century, the Old West is sort of dying off.
That's it.
The revolution in Mexico is more or less over.
You get your repeaters and your revolvers, but you also get your cool modern fully automatic stuff.
Yeah, because Lancaster's running a Colt single action army. But then in the canyon scene, he's running a bolt action like no one's business.
Oh yeah,
and he looks great doing it. But yeah, it's the weapons handling in the film exudes like a cool professionalism.
Yeah,
everyone just knows how to carry themselves, especially Marvin and Lancaster. And Strode's bow is one of the up there with Hardy Kruger's crossbow.
Oh,
let's face it. Yeah. Woody Strode with that crossbow, with that longbow, is peak. And we mentioned earlier his memoir, Gold Dust, and there's a great story from his book about some escapades he got up to in Las Vegas. So in the book, Strode describes shooting Vegas Vic, which is that famous neon sign which kind of like waves.
Oh, like the cowboy.
Yeah.
And
apparently, in the 60s, it used to say "Howdy, partner," like repeatedly. And apparently, Strode and friends were absolutely smashed. And at like 3 a.m. in the morning, they decided they were going to shoot Vegas Vic in the face with the longbow. And so and the way he tells it in the book, he says, "I was 16 stories up, standing on a ledge. I was so drunk, I didn't care if I fell. I found the angle, set, let loose an arrow, and hit Howdy Partner right in the mouth. The whole statue started crackling, sparks were flying everywhere, and Howdy Partner blacked out and came to a stop." And the story gets even better because he then says, the cops arrived, I panicked, I ran down the hall, banged on Lee Marvin's door, said, "Lee, hold on to this bow and arrow for me, don't tell anyone." Lee's like, "Sure, I'll do it." and then he describes Lee as getting so excited that he let a shotgun off out the window. This is all in the book, which is well worth a read. So Lee's blasting a shotgun out the window. So I'm picturing him there with a Winchester 1897, just letting
slam firing it into a neon sign.
Who knows? And the police knock on Lee's room, as you would expect, and they find the bow, and he kind of like cops for it. And Woody says in the book, Lee was so proud it got to be the biggest joke in town. So amazing. Lee kind of, and apparently it made it into the press and all sorts.
We'll try and dig out the article for
the story of Lee Marvin shooting a bow and arrow like the famous neon sign Vegas Vic. But yeah, that's in Woody's book as well. It's apparently he liked to joke. Like
I really want to
he and
read
Lee
that.
like to joke. Yeah, it's
You need
good.
to get
It
a
really
copy of
is. You've read some of it, and I think I
It's
read a bit
fab.
of it last week,
Yeah.
and it's really well written. Really well written. Just to round out some of the other weapons we see in the film, there is actually a Vickers gun on the train.
Yeah, there is a bent tripod.
How cool is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Tripod gets probably it's bent because the take they used was like 3 times after they lassoed the damn thing off the roof of the train.
Well, actually, no. That Vickers gun stands in for that Winchester. So it's Browning, because it's a Browning machine gun on the train. And then when Raza runs it over, it becomes a Vickers.
Oh, does it? Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Makes sense.
According to IMFDB that I looked at.
Yeah.
So who knows?
And then of course the Lewis gun. We've got
yes.
Leona Lewis, and it looks he handles it so nicely.
Are they period correct, them Lewises?
Yeah, it probably would have been, because I think the film's set around 1918, 19.
Oh right, okay. Yeah, of course
I
it
think,
is.
or maybe early 20s. It's post the revolution, which kind of ended in 1920, I think.
Right.
Because they talk about Veer in the past tense and they talk about the revolution in the past tense. So I'm kind of guessing it's like early 20s.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually say in the movie, I don't think. Do correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, they capture that in Raza's compound, and Lee's running around with it like in the crook of his arm.
Like it's an assault rifle.
Yeah, it's brilliant because he grabs it and he's like, no, I'm not going to use it to escape. Draws his like Colt revolver and just like one shots a load of dudes. That's like
my favorite. One of my favorite moments of the entire film.
We'll talk about that in a minute, I'm sure.
Man. Yeah.
But that kind of like rounds out the alley small arms for this film.
I think that's it for me
There's
too.
a load of really cool stuff in there. But as you say, those knit, like that fold down knit.
It's so cool.
It's almost a cardigan.
Yeah. And
so
he even I think he even cracks out like a American Army greatcoat like near the end when it's cold at night.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, dude's dripping. Dude's absolutely dripping.
They all look pretty good. Like
they do.
Lancaster has one on as well, and Strode's like strutting around in like joggers.
And like desert boots, I think.
Yeah, looking real good.
On to favourite scenes?
I feel like we're going to have some overlap.
I think so. Because as you mentioned, with the Lewis gun coming into the film, it's my favourite moment. So Lee and Lancaster are in the compound, Woody Strode's firing off his arrows. It's like they're being hit with artillery.
So what we didn't mention in the alley tally is that Lancaster is also an explosives expert.
That's it.
And he's there with dynamite, sticks of dynamite, and he's like, how far can you fire an arrow with one of these taped to it?
Yeah.
Speaking of river counting, Rob, I did see someone on IMDb say that you can't tape arrows to dynamite because they wouldn't have carried tape in the desert with them in 1919 or 1920. Wow. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's a shame. That's ruined the whole film for me. Anyway,
no.
So
destroy every DVD that I see now.
So Strode and Lancaster tape up these arrows with dynamite, and the way that Lee describes it is he wants it to look like a French 75 is hitting the compound,
going off. Yeah, it's great,
and it's alley as hell. It's peak.
It's really cool. Is. So in that sequence, it's really military operation level. It's almost like the Dirty Dozen sequence where they say what they're going to do.
Watches too.
Pretty much, yeah.
They do. They're like. Yeah, synchronize at 4:30.
It's so
it's
good.
Great.
It's so good, and it's like a military operation. This bit, and everyone's sort of expertise come into play. So the revolutionaries probably think they're being attacked by some government force or something.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's running around, and they finally get into Raz's little like sleeping chamber, like little room, and they find Maria, and Lancaster's going to coldly execute him in his bed, and. Marvin goes, no, don't do it. And I'm like, well, why not? It doesn't matter, like, why not?
Because they're all friends. And that's something that we didn't mention.
Of course they know him, don't they?
Marvin Lancaster and Palance's characters all know each other. They all fought together in the revolution, so it's a tricky mission, but they're professionals, Rob, so they went and did the mission anyway.
Yeah, it's ungentlemanly to do
to make that cold hard money. Also, speaking of money, at the beginning of the film, Grant gives them like a saddlebag full of $100,000 worth of gold coins, none of which are above $50 denomination. That's what they say in the film. Money? How are they carrying that money in a tiny box? Like, they're walking around with it one-handed.
But what happens to it?
I have no idea. Why didn't they keep that and just
not that would have been funny. That would have been a great thing at the end if on the way, like, Marvin had gone, we still got the gold. He'd forgot about that.
Like Ryan had just like tapped the saddlebags.
Because I completely forgotten he gives him that money. They never use it for anything.
You do by the end of the film.
Oh well, that's a plot hole you could ride a train through. That's mad. Anyway, but no, getting back to the Lewis gun bit. We can have plot holes in final thoughts. Okay. So as you say, they come out of the compound, they've got Maria. Lancaster knocks her out, which dates the film horrendously. And there's also a horrible line where Lancaster's yearning after a woman and he says, "Bring me any woman of any age." And I was like, what the fuck? That's a bit weird.
There's some very period dialogue. There's some very 1900s, like 10th of the century dialogue.
A little bit, a little bit weird. Anyway.
They're hard men, Rob. They're professionals.
They are, yeah. Well, so Marvin comes out of this little hut, stone building, and he sees a Lewis gun, shoulders it, and then these stormtrooper-esque bandidos come out of nowhere, and Marvin just casually has a revolver, and he just like knocks them out one by one. But it's the most casual shooting I've ever seen anyone do. It's so
he looks immense doing it. He really does.
It's so cool,
because he's kind of like running backwards at one point, draws it, and does like a very 1900s stance where he just kind of like draws a bead on the dude as he comes out of the door, and then just drops him
from the hip as well, not looking, just point shooting him. Amazing. That's Marvin on film.
I don't know why anyone else was there. Like Lancaster, like Marvin could have done the whole mission on his own
himself. Yeah, but it's not only that's my favorite moment, because I think I like the whole movie. It's hard to say one favorite scene, but for me it's the dialogue for this movie really that is the standout, and it's so sharp and funny in it. Apart from that Burt Lancaster line about the women of any age, which I thought was a bit weird, it's the thing. So I picked out some of my favorites. So we've got at the end, Grant calls Lee Marvin a bastard, and Marvin does the smirk, and he goes, "Yes, sir. In my case, an accident of birth. In your case, a self-made man." Cold line, ice cold.
In comes the score. And he just walks off, and it's cold.
It's so good. Then we have before they make it back to Grant, Rico says to Dolworth, "So what else is on your mind besides 100 proof women, 90 proof whiskey, and 14 karat gold?" And Lancaster looks up at him and gives him this little smirk and goes, "Amigo, you just wrote my epitaph." Just beautiful. And my last one does always make me laugh. It's Palance's delivery of it, really. But the lady says, "Where did the bullet?" Dolworth says, "Where did the bullet bite you?" And Dolworth goes, "In the arse, you." And Raza looks at his thigh that's been shot, and he goes, "Oh, another 2 inches, mamacita." It's just great, really good. Because Palance doesn't get much to do.
No, but one of my favorite scenes, speaking of just dialogue-driven scenes, one of my favorite scenes is that canyon sequence, which like one-on-one between Lancaster and Palance, and Raza, Palance's character, has a really nice sort of monologue where he talks about the revolution and war.
Yes.
He talks about like revolution is a great love affair. In the beginning, she's a goddess, a holy cause. But every love affair has a terrible enemy, time. And the revolution sort of becomes a whore, and you never find another lover, another cause. And everything becomes a like a sordid, just passionless trudge.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a there's such like pathos and depth to that monologue, which you don't expect from the rest of the film.
It reminds me of Swiss Tony from the Fast Show, though.
Yeah.
You know about Lancaster. Doing revolution is much like having love with a beautiful woman. It does really remind me of that when you just
stood next to a Rover 75. Yeah.
Yeah. But you're right. The dialogue makes it, and that scene really grounds the film a little bit, and
It does.
It makes you care about Palance, because obviously they've got to get Palance on side for you as the viewer, because they're going to not kill him. So it's like they have to do something.
They've shown him as this murderous revolutionary, shot all the federales, although they kind of couch that in terms of these particular regiment of federales
were bad bastards.
Were torturous. Medley, Marvin's wife, shot Raza's village up. You know, they kind of set that up, but he's ruthless.
But then they don't, with that killing his wife thing, they don't show Rico. I mean, maybe that's why Rico knocks as many of them out as he does. But like, there's not a sequence where, because in that thing, he could have been really hot-headed and joined in the fight and killed guys, but he doesn't. So it does show a nice level of restraint.
Yeah, because he walks away, doesn't he?
Yeah, I like that.
Because he's a professional.
Yeah, exactly. Coming back to that all the time.
But Lancaster has a good line about the revolution too in that sequence, and he says, "The revolution, when the shooting stops and the dead are buried, the politicians take over, and it all adds up to one thing: a lost cause."
Yeah,
which is a great line,
really good.
And I think his performance and Palance's performance in that canyon sequence are top notch. They're great.
Oh, great!
Because the premise of that scene is Lancaster's holding them off while the others get away. There's 7 against 1. No problem. Lancaster ends up like dropping all of them, and then taking Raza back with him anyway. But I think my initial favorite sequence of the film is that one I mentioned earlier on, where they're in a canyon on the way towards Raza's compound, and they run into some of Raza's men. And Strode's scouting ahead, and he says 6 men on horseback. To enter the canyon, and then Ryan looks at them and goes, "They've got bolt actions," which I think was nice little inclusion of Ryan getting a line. And Lee looks at the Strode and Ryan, because they weren't in the revolution. Like, Lancaster knows this, but the other 2 guys, they weren't revolutionaries, so they don't know that when the guy takes his hat off to greet them and say hello, and if it goes over his gun hand, he's going to draw a gun and start shooting at them. So he explains that to them and then tells them where to go and position themselves for an ambush. And
which is why I like them. I say it's like a military western.
It is
because of that little things in there. Yeah,
it is. And they walk up and pretend they're prospectors, both carrying the Winchester shotguns.
Yeah,
and then they absolutely let loose and blast.
They hammer the guys, don't they?
Yeah, it's great. Lee's there slam firing.
Yeah.
I think Lancaster jumps across 3 rocks to get cover at one point.
Yes, great.
Burt Lancaster is exceptionally physical and vigorous in a lot of
very
his roles.
Much so.
And this is one of the films where he shows that, because his character is introduced diving out of a window and doing some parkour to escape from an angry husband, and then later on he's shown climbing up a rock face, no bother, just free climbing. Jumping across canyons and stuff. It's very physical. They're all quite physical in this.
They are.
But Lancaster especially is.
Really much so. Yeah, very much so. I always think he's like Brad Pitt now. He's got that rugged, toughness about him. Yeah.
This is like I said for Lee, this is the perfect film for Lancaster.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. And you never, even though they sort of didn't get on set, you never seeps into the movie. You know, I don't feel like they're trying to outact each other. They just have good chemistry on screen. It's a shame they didn't get on off it, because I'd love to see more of them together.
Yeah, that's very true.
Would have been good.
Coming off the Lewis gun you mentioned earlier, I love the bit on the train where they're making their escape, and Lee kind of sits down and then takes a knee, props up the Lewis gun in a almost target shooting pose, and just starts popping off at
It's so good. Yeah,
it's so good. But I do think that canyon scene with Lancaster and Palance kind of lifts the film in terms in terms of just more of a what's the word I'm looking for? It's more of a
bit more highbrow.
It's more of a thinking man's military western.
Yeah, there's more going on than just shooting.
And that's where the parallels, I think, with the Wild Bunch come in, because that's not the gory shoot 'em up that people always remember it as, because of that end sequence, which is incredible. But yeah, any other favorite scenes, Rob?
No, not really. I enjoy the whole thing, and I think the things I love about it are also the things I don't enjoy. So maybe running into final thoughts would make more sense for me to explain more. So final thoughts. So it annoys me because as much as the movie has action going on and things happening, I feel like it really front ends it, and I wish that it would have, at the end, we could have had maybe a little shootout or proper showdown with Grant's men, because it wraps itself up really neatly, really quickly. And I'm always sat there thinking, oh, this is the bit where they have a shootout with Grant's men, and they don't. Because in that end sequence, I'm thinking, you're outnumbered here by Grant's dudes. They've all got shotguns and rifles as well. Surely Grant's just going to turn around and go, kill these guys. And they would have, I'm not paying you 100 grand, you've disobeyed me, kill them. And it's all just a bit...
And it doesn't really make sense that they don't.
No. They just sort of let him
Lee calls Grant a bastard. They steal his wife. Well, Raza steals his wife. They protect Raza.
Yeah, exactly.
Because Grant wants to have one of his cronies shoot him. And then they essentially probably also take the ransom money.
Possibly. Yeah, it's bizarre, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, did they take the ransom money with them? Because it was obviously a rescue mission.
He didn't get paid. They didn't get paid, did they? But then you said they got given those gold coins for whatever.
Well, they did at the beginning of the film, but did they take those with them? I don't know. I suppose they did.
Maybe they lost them during that
maybe Grant kept hold of that saddlebag. I don't know. I can't remember.
It would have been a nice callback.
It would have been, and I completely agree. I think a shootout at the end with Grant's men would have added a lot of weight to that conclusion, where there's a dozen of Grant's men, and they're protecting Raza. They're explaining that his wife is not going to stay with him; she's going to go back with Raza. So why would Grant just roll over and allow them to do that?
I know, but then it's also probably not. But then it is also nice that the guys talk their way out of it rather than shoot their way out of it. Maybe that adds to the professionalness of it.
It's a perfectly fine ending, but I think it's set up really to be like a little climax, because
it would be nice.
In terms of action, the climax of the film obviously is Lancaster's shootout in the canyon with Palance and his men, and that's great. It's a really great sequence. There's a lot of suspense to it. There's a lot of, as we mentioned, thoughtful dialogue, rumination on revolution, etc. But beautifully shot as well. There's that sequence where they ride back and meet Grant, and it's like, okay, so just that's it. Okay,
it just sort of fizzles away a little bit.
Yeah, it does a little bit.
That's not to say I don't really love the movie, because I really do. It's a real.
Oh, no.
Netflix recently uploaded like a really crispy, I think it might be the Blu-ray edition of it, and it's crisp as heck. Good. It's me and my dad sat down to watch it, and my dad's not a big movie guy, and he really enjoyed it. And I always think, if someone isn't a big movie person and they enjoy a movie, and they go, "Oh, that was really fun," like
I've been telling you to watch this for about a year, haven't I?
I watched it like 4 or 5 months ago for the first time, and I was like, where's this movie been all my life? I've seen The Magnificent Seven.
It's one of my absolute favorites.
But I've not seen this. I haven't seen this one. But it's a great adventure film. Rattles along, even though it does fizzle out for me a little bit.
It's paced quite well, yeah.
But the pacing is lovely. And then my other big criticism, and we've alluded to it a whole show, is I think Strode, Ryan, and Palance are woefully underdone, undercooked. They don't have enough to do. Ryan's sort of oddly absent for maybe 60% of the movie, because he gets captured. You don't see him. And then he just gets injured, and he's not really useful.
And he's left behind a lot as well.
Yeah.
He's left with the horses most of the time.
And I know that's his job, but he doesn't have as much to do as you'd want. Yeah. And surely Strode, he is useful for his part in blowing up all the TNT and stuff in the ambush and being on the ridges. But when Lancaster goes away to the ridge, I always think, take Strode with you as cover.
Yeah.
Yeah, have him up on those rocks because it'd been perfect for him. Because with the burn arrow or a long gun or something.
Mm-hmm.
There is 4 guys like, at this point. I'm always like, come on,
Yeah, just a little more dialogue from them would have been great, just to learn a bit more about Strode's character, because we get a fairly decent idea about Lancaster and Marvin's characters, and we know that Ryan is the moral heart of the film because he prevents the shooting of 9 of the horses that are captured, from the my favorite scene, the bit in the canyon where they initially have that shootout with Raz's men, who are just, they don't know that they're coming for that. They just think they're just some gringos. And we haven't even mentioned that great sequence where Lancaster goes off to scout. Why wouldn't Strode be the guy that was doing the scouting?
Right? Yeah. See, that's what I mean. But it's a thing. It's Lancaster's top billing, isn't he? So you have him doing more.
Yes.
But then you have the character.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Lancaster goes off for a couple of for like a day ahead of them. He leaves markings to say whether it's safe or not. Cross is upside down, not upside down. And then he's captured by some of Raz's men.
Yeah.
And they've got him hanging upside down. And Lee Marvin has a very cool little sequence where he slides down a rock face with a revolver in hand.
Oh, it's so
and then
cool.
just like points it in a Mexican bandit's face.
And he machetes a dude to death, didn't he, as well?
Yeah.
Off screen, but you still see it. Yeah.
And Strode does have a little part in that sequence.
Let's have a moment in that
where he saves Marvin by shooting one of the dudes.
Yeah.
But that's kind of an element of the film that Strode could have done as the tracker.
Yeah. I just think, and I know other people might not even think they're underused at all, but me and Matt really like Woody Strode, and I know a lot of others do. And when you see a movie and he's on the billing, you're like, oh, great, fucking top, like Woody Strode, like really underrated.
Great actor.
Yeah, great actor.
I think he's largely forgotten.
I think so. Yeah,
is a real shame.
If you're not a Western fan, you might not know. And if you're not a fan of like 50s, 40s American football, you might not know.
Yeah. He's a physical presence, but he has a subtlety to the way he acts in scenes. And he's completely right in the book when he says, I don't care what billing I am, I can steal a scene with the best of them.
Yeah.
And he can.
Yeah.
And there's elements of that in this film. He doesn't have one scene where he does do that. But there's little sequences where you can tell he's putting his A game into the short bits of dialogue that he does get. And he exudes that professionalism. Like he gets an order. He gets an order, he spins on his heel and he goes and does it. And it's all plays into that very cool, precise, professional vibe that they all exude, and makes you think these guys really are professionals on a mission, and they know what they're going to do.
You really are the most professional bastards
in all of Mexico.
In all of Mexico City. But I think that's great. Like I think that rounds up perfectly, and it is one of those. It's a great film. It's one of the classics. Westerns.
Beautifully shot, great locations. Yeah, really great cast. Really strong mercenary film.
Exactly. What a great opener to Merc Month. So I've got in my notes here, quality start to Merc Month. And next week's film is 1971's Universal Soldier, starring George Lazenby.
What a film that is, because that has a lot of interesting elements to it, and is probably best known for killing George's career. So that'll be an interesting one.
Pretty much. And Simon Phillips, who was quite ill at the time. It's a very interesting movie. A lot of alley kit on display again. Some insane drip, as I've mentioned this week. There's some good drip in that film too. And if you love Merc Month 2 and if you're enjoying what we're doing, please help get the word out, share the episode around, leave us a review on Apple Pods. That always really helps. Yes, and if you want to catch back up with Merc Month 1, they're all on fightingonfilm.com for your viewing pleasure. And I think we'll have a little blog post with Merc Month 1 films.
By the time you hear this, there will be a blog with all 4 episodes listed. Thanks, guys. Bye.